280 guests were seated on the lawn at Redbird Ridge when a woman in a housekeeping uniform walked past the flower girl, past a groomsman who tried to block her, and stopped directly in front of the groom. Her name tag read Odessa. "Marlowe," she said, "you need to stop this wedding. Right now. Before you sign anything else." For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Before those 5 minutes were over, the bride's father would try to physically take the book from her hands. The wedding would collapse in front of every guest with a phone raised to film it. And Marlowe Kestner would learn that the mountain he was standing on had never actually belonged to his family, that the marriage he was about to enter had been quietly designed, for 3 years, to make sure nobody ever found that out. Redbird Ridge was 600 acres of Blue Ridge mountainside, and today it was dressed for the wedding of the decade: white chairs, a magnolia arch, a string quartet, champagne trays moving carefully so the afternoon sun wouldn't catch a glass wrong in the photos. Marlowe Kestner, 38, had built a fortune in sustainable timber and mountain real estate. He was minutes from marrying Sable Voss, only daughter of Warwick Voss, chairman of Voss and Merriman Trust, the oldest private bank in Charlotte. Then a housekeeper who had worked in his home for 3 years walked down the aisle holding a swollen, water-damaged ledger against her chest like something that might shatter. "You can't be up here," a groomsman said, grabbing her arm. "Don't touch her," Marlowe said, before he decided to say it. Warwick Voss was already moving. "Marlowe, this is a member of your staff having an episode. Security will handle it. Let's continue the ceremony." "What's in the book, Odessa?" "Marlowe," Sable said, her voice cracking, "have her removed. Now." He looked at his bride, then at his father-in-law, then at the woman who had folded his shirts for 3 years and never said more than a dozen words to him at once. Something about the way she held that ledger, like it cost her more to carry it up that aisle than it would to walk away, made him certain of one thing. "5 minutes," he said. "Give me 5 minutes." Warwick Voss stepped forward and reached for the ledger. "That's private family property. Hand it over." Odessa stepped back out of his reach, and for the first time since she'd started working at Redbird Ridge, her voice came out steady. "No, sir. It's not your family's. That's the problem." She hadn't come to that lawn with nothing to lose. 3 days earlier, her younger sister had begged her not to go through with it. "You'll lose the job. You'll lose the room over the garage. You'll lose everything, and for what? A book nobody with money is going to believe." Odessa had an overdue notice folded in her coat pocket that morning, the kind that gives you 30 days before eviction proceedings start. A week before that, a man who introduced himself only as working for the Voss family office had shown up at the boathouse while she was clearing it out and offered her $4,000, cash, for anything she found in there before the wedding. She hadn't understood what he meant at the time. She understood it now. She was not brave because she had nothing left to lose. She walked down that aisle because she had almost everything to lose, and did it anyway. In the study, away from the noise, Marlowe opened the ledger. Odessa told him fast, her grandmother, Cornelia Frey, a notary clerk who'd spent 30 years never talking about one stretch of the 1970s. The strongbox Odessa found after the funeral. A year of nights spent cross-referencing county deed records on her days off. What she'd finally found 4 days ago, behind a false panel in the boathouse, the original 1978 paperwork showing that this land, the exact ground the ceremony was standing on, had been Swimmer family land, Eastern Band Cherokee, until Marlowe's father moved it into a shell company for a fraction of its value under a signature Cornelia had notarized and later realized was never real. "My grandmother spent her whole life ashamed of what she signed," Odessa said. "I wasn't going to spend mine the same way, folding shirts in this house, staying quiet, watching you build a wedding on top of it." Marlowe's jaw tightened. "My father's dead. I didn't know any of this." "I believe you." A pause. "But somebody else did." That single sentence was the reason his family's attorney went silent on the phone 30 seconds later, before saying, "Marlowe, you need to sit down." 3 years ago, during a routine title review tied to a refinancing package, an associate at Voss and Merriman Trust had flagged the 1978 transfer as likely defective. A senior compliance officer had written back 4 words that would end up on the front page of a regional paper within the month: table pending Kestner relationship. It wasn't just a wedding. It was a way to bury a legal problem so deep inside a family that nobody would ever be able to challenge it again. When Marlowe walked back onto the lawn, Warwick Voss met him at the arch, voice low and practiced. Whatever paperwork problem exists on this land is 50 years old. It has nothing to do with today. You clean rooms, Odessa, Warwick said, turning on her without warning, contempt sharpening every word. You do not understand what happens when families like ours collapse. Odessa didn't flinch. No, Mr. Voss. I understand exactly who gets crushed when families like yours refuse to fall. Did you know? Marlowe asked Sable directly. Marlowe, I don't handle bank operations, that's not a no. Sable's face went through something complicated, fear, then a flash of genuine confusion that looked, for 1 second, almost like relief that someone had finally asked her the question out loud. She didn't answer. She turned and walked toward the house alone, and nobody, not even her father, went after her. There was no wedding that day. 40 miles away, in Cherokee, North Carolina, a woman named Wren Swimmer had grown up hearing her grandfather point at a distant ridgeline from the highway and say, "That was ours before it wasn't." Her mother kept a small jar of soil on the kitchen windowsill, collected from that mountain decades earlier, the last physical thing the family still had of it. Her grandfather had died 4 years ago, believing no one with power would ever admit he'd been telling the truth. When Priya Calloway's office called and asked the family to come look at some documents, Wren's mother wouldn't touch the folder at first. She stood at the far end of the conference table with her arms crossed until Wren laid the old photograph of her grandfather standing on the ridge next to the forged 1978 signature. "That's not his hand," her mother said quietly. "He never made his S like that. Not once in 60 years. She sat down slowly, and for a long moment nobody in the room spoke. Then she said, almost to herself, he was telling the truth. For a while, it looked like the truth might not be enough. Warwick Voss's bank issued a public denial calling the allegations an attempt by opportunistic parties to extract a settlement from a respected institution. A cable segment aired calling Odessa an unstable former employee. A grocery store cashier who used to chat with her every week suddenly found something urgent to do at another register. Her landlord, coincidentally or not, filed the eviction paperwork 2 weeks early. Odessa sat on the floor of her sister's apartment one night with Cornelia's unsent letter in her lap and asked out loud whether telling the truth had just finished destroying the only stable life she'd built. Then Marlowe's board of directors, spooked by the headlines, scheduled an emergency vote on whether to remove him as CEO of Kestner Sustainable Holdings while the land dispute was unresolved. His own outside counsel told him privately that without the internal bank memo, which the bank was refusing to produce, citing privilege, the ledger alone might not hold up against Voss and Merriman's lawyers. A forensic document examiner hired by the bank side publicly questioned whether the ledger's water damage made the ink dating scientifically unreliable. For 3 days, it looked like 50 years of silence was about to win one more time. It was Sable who ended it. She came to Marlowe's attorney's office alone, without her father knowing, and set a printed email chain on the table. She'd found it 18 months earlier, going through her father's home office for an unrelated tax document, and had done nothing with it, telling herself it wasn't her business, that surely her father had a reason. "I didn't know everything," she said. "But I knew there was something. I let myself not ask, because asking would have cost me the wedding, and the wedding was supposed to fix everything for both families." She pushed the pages across the table. "This is the memo they said didn't exist." It was the compliance officer's original email, forwarded twice, ending with the 4 words that broke the case wide open. Warwick Voss resigned as chairman 4 months later. The board vote to remove Marlowe never happened. The land settlement, negotiated over the following months, returned 240 acres, including the ridge itself, to the Swimmer family and the Eastern Band Land Trust, with financial restitution for 50 years of lost use and a conservation agreement co-managed going forward. Marlowe didn't fight it. He'd spent too many nights by then in his father's old study, reading files he'd never had reason to open, to feel anything but the weight of what they'd built on top of. Odessa lost the housekeeping job within a week, her own choice, not his. Ren Swimmer called her the day the settlement papers were finalized. "You gave my family back something we thought was gone for good. Whatever you need next, you're not doing it alone." Priya Calloway hired her as a research assistant, then helped fund her paralegal studies. 2 years later, Odessa was doing for other families what no one had ever done for hers, finding the paper trail before it disappeared for another 50 years. 1 year to the day after the wedding that never finished, a much smaller crowd gathered on that same ridge. No string quartet. No champagne. Just family, a few tribal elders, a handful of reporters, and the wind. Marlowe spoke first, briefly. The truth doesn't need a title to be real. He let it sit. He didn't explain it further. Then Odessa stepped forward, not in a housekeeping uniform this time, but a plain grey suit. She held her grandmother's ledger in both hands. "For 3 years, being unseen was the whole job," she said. "But being unseen never meant I was blind." Ren walked up beside her and placed the new deed into her hands. Odessa set it down on the small table beside them, and laid Cornelia Fry's ruined ledger next to it, the swollen leather cover beside the clean new paper, 50 years apart, finally touching. The wind turned the ledger's damaged pages once, on its own, and went still. One book carried the lie. The other returned the mountain. They had spent 50 years waiting for someone powerful to tell the truth. In the end, it was the woman everyone had trained themselves not to see.